The new Black Templars Codex supplement is out, and it is a banger, and it actually came with some new characters, one of which was the Black Templars Crusade Ancient, a Space Marine holding a banner specifically for the Black Templars. Now this is a really cool model, however, I don't really want one. He's a Space Marine carrying a banner, and he's fine. He's 65 points, so he's nice and cheap. However, this new Codex supplement has recontextualized a lot of the data sheets for the Black Templars that we know and love, and one of those is the Marshal. And the Marshal is one of the coolest Space Marines that Games Workshop has ever sculpted. However, that comes with its own problems. I love this guy. The big sweep of his cape, the crazy pose of his sword held aloft, the full skeleton dude on his back. This is a one-of-a-kind mini. And speaking of one-of-a-kind, the Castellan is also amazing. A straight recreation of one of the old John Blanche artworks, this incredibly unique character led to some issues when I needed a second one. I couldn't edit this mini enough to make a second one, so I ended up using a Horus Heresy kit to invent my own Castellan, and I think for the Marshal I'll need to do something similar. The Crusade Ancient has a lot of the same details as the Marshal, and this gives me some ideas. The humble Black Templars Marshal has gotten a huge glow up in the new Black Templars Codex, and so I'm gonna want at least 2 of these suckers to join my 2 Castellans. And so I'm thinking I can turn this lowly battle brother, I guess sword brethren, into a Marshal. Breaking into the box, this kit is kinda surprising. I did not expect the banner to be all in one part. This should make it easy though, because I'm not planning on using the banner today. I clipped out the bits for the Space Marine and cleaned them up. This model has some absolute silliness in its cutting. I feel like the engineer was just showing off. His foot has this little bearing attached to a rock on the base connected to the other foot. And the handle of his holstered pistol is in 2 halves. One half is on his thigh and the other half is connected to his knee armor. It goes together just fine, it just feels a little silly. Now to turn this guy into a Marshal. The backpack is completely plain, but the Marshal's pack has this whole little guy on there, complete with an iron halo. I'm gonna steal the top of the flag. This is a Psyker Skull, the mortal enemy of the Templars. And that's not the only Marshal-y thing on this fella. Marshals have these really interesting shoulder pad things. It's an extra shoulder part that goes over the normal shoulder pad. The Marshal has this, and his cape is dragged up over his shoulder, and then the extra plate pins it down. I thought that that's what it was for, but on the Crusade Ancient, he has this piece, but no cape. I'll have to fix this with one of my all-time favorite boxes. I've taken all the bits I want to use from the Crusade Ancient kit, and I've still got the banner ready to go. I could stick this onto any Space Marine I want and still have a Crusader Ancient. Although I feel like a Sword Bro is the wrong body to stick the banner on. Sword Bros are the veterans. They're exempt from all of the normal duties of a typical battle brother. Their only job is to take whatever weapon they want and go kill stuff. And so I feel like they're not wasting their time carrying the banner. This is more a job for a lowly initiate or probably even a neophyte. Now I'm all done with the Crusade Ancient sprue, but I still need some bits, and luckily I'm a Black Templars player and I have access to the Sword Bro box. In my opinion, the gold standard of Space Marine boxes. This is a kit with 5 fancy Space Marines, all with capes, all with arm options, basically every single weapon in the game. You get all the backpack doodads. This box is incredible. I only have 3 squads of Sword Bros, but I think I've been through 5 boxes because it's just so good for Templars bits and kind of any Space Marine bits. Like if you're collecting a Space Marine army and you're looking at the prices of all of these different characters and it really starts to add up, I would look into this box because you get 5 fancy Space Marines, you buy this one box, all of a sudden you got a captain, you got a lieutenant, you got a chaplain. You could, with the right bits and the right paint job, you could even turn these last 2 guys into like some tech marines or some apothecaries or maybe even a librarian. I really like this kit, and this is what's gonna let me turn this little sucker into my Marshal. Looking at my boy, one thing he needs is a right-handed plasma pistol. Looking through the Sword Brethren box, there is a plasma pistol, but it is a lefty. Luckily, there is this right-handed pistol arm, so with a little cutting and scraping, I bet I can make it work. I cut off the bits I'll need, and in the instructions, I X'd out these parts so that the next time I reach for this box, I'll know that I already stole some of these bits. Now I need to figure out how to take the hand off the bolt pistol and the gun from the plasma pistol and work them together. I carefully cut away the plasma fist handle, doing a few slices back and forth until it popped off. And while I had the plasma pistol out, I drilled out the barrel using this little reamer bit to make the opening bigger. Now I've got to take this handle and make it fit. That would normally be really easy, but the Templars have their weapons chained to their hands, and I want to keep that. I cut away as much plastic as I could, and I used my Dremel and some sanding twigs to get it as smooth and flat as I could, keeping as much of the chain as possible. Then I attached my hand. Holding up the plasma pistol, it looks like I need to lose some of the chain in the back and a few links from the front. Now I can glue it onto the gun, and it looks just about perfect. I've got my weapon, and I shaved down the arm so I can attach it, but I always have problems when the model is taking aim. I want to make sure that that arm is sticking out straight, so I need to see the model attached to its base. To get started on that, I cut off the tactical rock that was attached to his foot so that I had a perfect blank Space Marine. Then I grabbed a Cobalt Keep 40mm magnet base and sunk in a magnet. Now to build up some material. For my Templars, I like to use pieces of pine bark. I found some nice nuggets, and I got to work filling up my base using some sandpaper to make some of these bark pieces nice and flat. Once I had down a layer, I started to build up, gluing some pieces on top of the other pieces, and then checking to see if my Marine could stand. I like how he's positioned, but his back leg needs a boost. I glued down some 1/4-inch cork and carved it up to make a nice flat spot for his foot to go. This is the structure, now to fill in the gaps. I made up some milliput and squished this down into the recesses. Using a wet piece of cork, I crushed the clay into the crevices. The wet cork also presses in some random natural texture, which is perfect. Now I need to cover up the flat spots. I put down some wood glue and then sprinkled on some small pebbles, then some quartz sand, and then some fine grained sand to fill in all the little gaps. Space Marines have nice big feet with plenty of room for superglue, so it's probably not essential, but I still want a pin just to make sure that this fella doesn't snap off right in the middle of a tournament. I drilled and inserted a 1mm brass rod into his foot and then stabbed these down into the cork, putty, and wood bark. Then I dripped some ultra thin superglue to make it rock solid. He's not going anywhere. I want to add a little razzle-dazzle to the base, so I grabbed an orc skull and stuck it down. Now that my fella is standing, I can glue down the plasma arm, and I can get that arm exactly right. Now for that other tricky bit, the shoulder shield. I went back to my Sword Bros box and cut out a cape. It fits like a glove, but it's hard to get this shoulder plate on top of it. I'm gonna need to shave this down a lot. I took my Dremel and removed as much material as I possibly could. Once some material was removed, the plastic got soft enough that I could bend it and twist it with my fingers. And as I was cutting away plastic, I would periodically check by looking at my lamp through it. Once I could see the light shining through the plastic, I knew I had to stop cutting. I glued down my cape, and it was still standing a little bit too proud, so I Dremeled the outside too to make it thinner and thinner. With lots and lots of fussing, I finally had enough room, and I squished down the extra plate with a little bit of green stuff to fill in the gaps. Now my fella is looking regal, I need to get that topper on there. I took the Psyker skull and a little piece of plastic I cut from the sprue, and plastic glued these down on top of the backpack. Now the backpack doesn't fit with the cape on there, so I had to bump it out a little bit with some more green stuff. I used a popsicle stick to get it reasonably square and then super glued it on. While I had the green stuff out, I stuck a little bit in his neck and then stuck down his helmet. The Crusade Ancient helmet is really unique and I feel like has Marshal written all over it. Now he's looking good. I think the last little touch is to make his cape a little bit different from the other Sword Bros. I glued on a bunch of purity seals. Then I stuck on a shoulder shield. I don't know how many more things this guy can have on this shoulder, it's really full. Then for his plasma pistol, I grabbed one of my intercessor sprues and cut off a scope. I cleaned up the back of the plasma pistol and stuck this down. I like the Han Solo look of a pistol with a big ol' scope. It makes him extra accurate. Although in-game, I never managed to hit with the plasma shot. I went back to the Sword Bro kit and grabbed this little lantern. This will fit perfectly right between his legs. Now he's done, but I still feel like my cape is not looking its best. I went over the spot that I Dremeled with some Tamiya putty and then used my plastic glue to thin this down and smooth it out. Then when it was dry, I gave it a light sanding with the twig to make it as smooth and perfect as the rest of the mini. During the index days of the Black Templars, the Marshal was a Space Marine captain who was a little bit worse with a little bit more of a strict loadout, but a little bit cheaper, so he was fine. Now in the Codex Supplement times of the Black Templars, this guy is really good. He's got 2 abilities. One of them is amazing, and the other one is amazing but kind of funny. His first ability, Inspirational Exemplar, grants him and his squad critical hits on 5s and 6s, which is really spicy because the Black Templars, we have criticals on our weapons. Chain swords have sustained hits 1, and power swords, which is what this guy's got, get lethal hits. And so lethal hits 5s and 6s is a really, really good ability. And speaking of the power sword on this sucker, it is 7 attacks base, but actually it's 8. Because of his second ability. The Marshal is so angry that he gets +1 attack for every enemy unit within 6 inches of him. And if I'm attacking something, that means there's an enemy unit within 6 inches. So his attack profile is basically 8. and it can very easily be 9. You just need multiple units within 6 inches of him. So if I'm attacking something, I just scoop my butt 5.5 inches closer to the rhino that just dumped out some Chaos Space Marines, and now all of a sudden he's getting 9 attacks by himself. Those are my favorite kind of rules in 40k, the ones where you read them and you're like, that's dumb. But also, it perfectly encapsulates the lore, because the Black Templars are very angry, and the Marshal, the leaders of the Black Templars, are the angriest. Suffer not the alien to live. And I'm going to make sure that alien's not living, because I'm going to throw one extra punch just to make sure. I am very happy with how my Crusade Ancient has been marshalified, and now I just got to paint this sucker up and see if he can match the Games Workshop glory of the original sculpt. I started off with a black prime, then I gave my second Marshal a zenithal of white ink. I've tried white paint in the past, but nothing flows through the airbrush better than ink. Once it was on there, I sprayed him with a coat of satin varnish to protect this fragile ink layer, and now I can move on to laying down my colors. I grabbed my Templar soup, which is a mixture of Black Templar, Leviathan Blue, and Lamian medium contrast paint, and globbed this on to all the exposed armor. I did my best to keep this off of the not black parts, painting it on as quick as I could so it has time to settle. Now, if this was a trooper, I would move on, but for an HQ, I like to refine this armor layer. I made up a blue-gray paint that matches the contrast and got to highlighting, doing a first layer that's just about the same color as the base coat. Then layering on some slightly brighter grays, doing some smaller patches over and over, building up these highlights. The trick is to keep a lot of the model almost black and make these highlights transition quickly from dark to almost white with just a few dots of white paint to make it look nice and shiny. I gave the top of his helmet a really strong peak, edge highlighting it up with bright grays, and then I edge highlighted it all over the backpack power plant. Now that the black armor is done, I can hit another part, his apron. I want to take advantage of the zenithal, so I started out glazing a watery brown all over to tint the white. Then I took a tan color and painted this over the spots that the white paint still shows through. I mixed in some more white paint and highlighted on top of the tan. Then I went in with my original tan and glazed this on the boundary between the tan and the brown to soften the transition. Now for the leather, and I always struggle to get a good looking leather. I based all the straps with brown, and then for the highlights, I took a very orangey brown and edge highlighted everything. The more saturated color helps the brown stay warm and interesting and looks different from the desaturated tans and browns on the rest of the cloth. With those parts done, I switched to the red bits. I base coated all the red stuff with some dark red. Then I mixed up a slightly lighter red and hit all the top facing red bits. After that, I took a pure red and did some edge highlights everywhere and glazed this on over the brightest spots. Now the red is bright and saturated, but still not bright enough for me, so I mixed in some orange and did another round of edge highlights, just on the rivets in the very top spots to push these areas even brighter. And you know what else looks good even brighter? That's right, EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find hobby goodies like our EOB dice, wet palettes, water slate decals, basing toppers and bits, and custom nameplates. And it's also the best way to support us with memberships. Each month, members get a credit that they can use on our new monthly train packs or any previous pack we have ever made. Come celebrate Orktober with us and head on down to the Orc Rodeo, a whimsical assortment of high-octane hijinks. This set includes a series of walls and barricades that not only create a coliseum of chaos, but also fits in with our previous Orky Walls terrains. Then there's the Goblin Game Carts, a series of mobile orc entertainments pulled along by an orcified food truck, literally dripping with some good orc grub. Rounding out this set are the three amigos, some brave little gobbos riding their violently bucking steeds. All this terrain was designed by us and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. After the red, I painted on his little shoulder shield. Starting out with the two yellow checkers, using some oranges to shade the bottoms of these squares, and then using all the reds I used previously to fill in the rest. And speaking of red, I have to paint the red cape. Usually I use a red speed paint for capes, but I want to try some layering to see how good I can get it. I put a dark red in the low spots and pure red in the high spots. Then I scribbled on some white paint on the brightest parts. I took my red, watered it down a lot, and then painted over the white until the white was just barely peeking through. And I glazed this over the boundaries of the dark red parts to soften the transition. I used a dotting stippling motion so that the cape had a texture all over, and after a lot of fussing, I got something that looked pretty good. Now to add a little extra spice. I want some gold trim on the cape, so I put a dot how high up I think the line should start. Then I took a plain card and cut a little T shape. I measured this against my dot and then cut it to length. Then I bent it up so I can use this piece as a guide on how high up my marks should be. I moved this all over the bottom half of the cape, making myself a line of marks so that I can have this line perfectly consistent all the way. Then I connected the dots, base coating a light brown line, and then I mixed in some yellow so I can highlight the line following the highlights I made on the cape. So the dark red parts are a dark yellow, and then the bright red spots have light yellow. And I did a few little lines and highlights of pure white paint to make the spots look like reflective gold. After that, I painted the purity seals, using the tans I have on my palette to get the papers looking good and the reds in my palette for the seals, keeping them dark with just a few small spots of bright red. I've been putting some extra painting oomph into this little Marshal here because number 1, he's a character, and number 2, he's a Black Templars character, and number 3, every single brushstroke that I put on this guy is gonna pay off on the tabletop, because you better believe this guy is gonna be coming in a lot of my Black Templars lists. With the new Black Templars Codex, the current zeitgeist is you take a Marshal and you attach a Castellan in a squad of sword bros. Every single Marine has a mastercrafted power weapon, and this little combination is an absolute Death Star. That is so many power sword swings hitting on 2s with all sorts of shenanigans. This combination will on average kill 13 Space Marines, 20 Guardsmen, or a Leman Russ battle tank. Oh, I want to kill some Leman Russ battle tanks. I want to kill Sean's Leman Russ battle tanks. And as soon as I get this sucker painted, I will have 2 of these squads. I have played a lot of games of Black Templar Space Marines with a lot of Sword Brethren, but now that I got a new codex, which has kind of given me new Sword Brethren, I'm excited to play a lot of games again. It all hinges on finishing this guy and maybe some Repulsor Executioners. For the power sword, I first double checked that it was smooth and perfect. I accidentally got some paint spilled on the sword, so I gently sanded it with a sanding twig so that it was smooth. Then I started layering down my power sword layers, doing some alternating stripes of white, and then making the opposite side of those stripes black. Then I filled in all the in-between chunks with blue. This is my map now to make it look good. I made up a light blue paint and painted this in between the white parts and the blue parts. Then I did the same thing with the black and a dark blue. The more transitional layers I do, the smoother the sword will look. Eventually, I went back to my pure white, thinned this down a lot, and carefully rubbed it back and forth, glazing it just a little bit over the surrounding area to try and make my blends invisible. This took a lot of trial and error, but eventually, with a lot of back and forth, I had it looking nice. When I was happy with my blade, I painted on a line of white running up the spine, and then I did the same edge highlight all along the business end of the blade. Then I picked out the little power wire. Now that the sword is done, I can move on to the gunmetal bits. I took some Army Painter Noble skin, which is a black with some brown in it, and glazed this over his gun, the little Psyker friend, the chains around his neck and his wrists. And I finished these areas with a dry brushing of silver. The speed paint gives me my highlights and shadows, and the silver paint gives me my glitter. For the handle of the sword, I went with gold, base coating this with a light brown, giving it a base coat of gold paint, and then a wash of brown. I also threw these colors in between his legs on the lantern. Once the wash was dry, I did some highlighting of gold mixed with silver paint, and for the lantern, I glazed on some white paint to make the insides look glowing. Then I used yellow contrast paint to color it. It was a little bit too bright, so I used some Fugan orange wash to make the glow a little bit darker and more saturated. Now for the front of the plasma pistol. I base coated it in yellow. This took a lot of layers, and I glazed a little bit of orange on the bottom half for contrast. Then for the glow, I started out spraying some blue ink through the airbrush to get a little puff of object source lighting. I glazed some blue speed paint onto my ribs, and then highlighted the tops of those ribs with some light blue, and a few specular highlights of white paint. I found when I paint a yellow plasma gun, darker, more saturated tubes look better than bright white tubes. They look too close to the yellow. Only a few tidbits left, the Templar cross on his forehead I painted with some grays on the bottom half and whites on top. And I hit his eye lenses with red, letting the paint spill out just a little bit, like his angry eyes are really glowing with the fires of hate. I highlighted his lenses with a little bit of orange and white, and then I used browns and tans from my palette to paint the Psyker skull. These colors ended up being too similar in tone to the gunmetal surrounding it, so I glazed in some brown speed paint to make it more colorful, and then some yellow paint to highlight, which made it look much more impactful. Now, my fella is done. I gave him a satin varnish to protect all my painting, and now I can do the base. I like to varnish before the base, so my minis are a little bit glossy for vibrant colors and shiny metals, and my bases are matte finish. I thinned down some Vallejo earth and sprayed this all over the base. This watery paint will just tint the zenithal a little, and then I dry brushed with some Pro Acryl Olive Flesh. I painted the rim of the base with Apple Barrel Gloss Black paint, and now he's almost done, but he needs a name. Top supporters on our website get immortalized as members of my crusade. And if you like the look of these nameplates, you can get them from EonsOfBattle.com and make them say whatever you want. I primed this little bit and then sprayed it with some gold paint. Then I dripped in some black panel liner to make the letters shine and then glued it to the front of the base. Introducing the newest Marshal in my Black Templars army, B-Dubs. One more Black Templars Marshal in the bag. I would say converting a Crusade Ancient into a Marshal was an overwhelming success. And I still got that banner bit, so eventually I'll get around to building an Ancient. Although, if anyone else is looking to put together some Crusade Ancients, particularly 3 if you're taking Vindication Task Force, a really good way to do that would be to get one of these, because these guys are awesome, but then get the generic Space Marine Ancient, because that kit actually comes with 2 banners. So that'd be a really good way of getting 3 banner dudes out of 2 kits. I have now painted Games Workshop's Marshal and Castellan, and I have painted my own take on the Marshal and Castellan, and I'm not sure which ones I prefer. The Games Workshop ones are the ones that inspired me to get the models and to convert my own, and I really like how they look. But I feel like mine hold up really, really nice. And I'm planning on taking both of them in game anyway, so I'm gonna have 2 big murder bricks. And I put together the 2 Castellans when they were bad in the rules, but now they're really, really good. Just goes to show you, in 40K, if you wait long enough, eventually everything will be good. Still waiting on Centurions. They're fine, but they could be better. With this second Marshal done, I am now ready to rock and roll with my Black Templars collection, Spam and Infantry, but I would also really like to put together some Repulsor Executioners. I've never put together a Repulsor kit, and the Executioner didn't interest me much, but in the new Codex, the Executioner is looking pretty spicy. My Black Templars collection will never stop growing. I think 90 more points added to the collection. I don't even know how many points I have right now, but I know I have some more in my pile of shame, so I got some work to do. Thanks for watching.